I remember the sound of the envelope tearing more than the words that followed. The lawyer's hands were steady. The notary seal was green, and the paper smelled faintly of disinfectant, as if it had been signed in a room where people weren't sure whether they were getting better or saying goodbye. He cleared his throat and began to read. The lake house, the minority stake in the family company, the retirement accounts he'd spent 40 years feeding. Not my name, not our children's names. They were transferred to a 29-year-old woman who introduced herself to my husband as his daughter and called him Dad with a softness I never could reproduce, no matter how many times I tried. The paper shook in my hands, not because I didn't know what it meant, but because I did. My husband had signed this on a day the hospital chart listed lorazepam in neat block letters, a sedative. The prescription sticker showed 3:14 p.m. The notary stamp on the will said 3:26. If you were in my place, would you keep the peace, close the folder, and swallow the humiliation so no one would whisper that you were a greedy widow? Or would you look for the truth, even if it meant disturbing the dead? We were married 40 years. We met in a grocery aisle between canned beans and flour, two strangers pretending to need the same jar of marinara so we could talk about anything else. We raised 2 children. We built a small company that smelled like paper and ink and coffee. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't perfect, but it was ours. When the doctor used the word event, not heart attack, not stroke, just an event, I learned a new kind of silence. My husband started repeating questions, misplacing his glasses on his head, saying he was fine when he wasn't. Then she appeared, young, polite, careful. She used the word compassion like a key. She said she had been looking for him for years, that she didn't want anything, that she only wanted a name for a father-shaped hole. He let her in as if she had been waiting at the door the whole time. I am not a jealous woman. I am not even an angry one. But I watched details. A nurse speaks in the doorway and eyes flick to the pill chart. A visiting friend carries a tote with legal tabs in pale yellow. A Mont Blanc pen appears on a tray where pens never survive. My husband's handwriting turns into a nervous little river, the line of his signature sliding downhill as if his hand had been chasing something faster than time. And when I ask gently why the family lawyer wasn't invited to any discussions about estate planning, I am told by the young woman, not by my husband, that old men are allowed to make new choices. DNA, then, I said once, in the hallway where the scrub sink glowed like an altar. If it's about names and holes, let's fill the hole with proof. It's about love, she answered. Love doesn't need lab work. Money does, I said. He died on a Monday morning. Gray rain, soft and almost embarrassed about falling. The lawyer in the blue suit came to the house that night. Not our lawyer. A new one who smelled like hotel air and cologne. He set the envelope on my kitchen table as if setting a crown. The seal caught the light. He asked if I was ready. I nodded because my hands weren't listening to my head. The lake house he rebuilt after the storm. Gone. The shares in the company, he said, would keep me comfortable if he went first. Gone. The IRAs, the bonds, the little side account he used to surprise the grandkids with plane tickets. Gone. In place of my name was hers. A footnote said I could remain in the primary residence and receive a small monthly stipend in lieu of contesting. Another paragraph, no contest, threatened to strip me of even that if I raised my voice. In that moment, I remembered something ridiculous. The day he bought that Mont Blanc. He looked like a boy with allowance money at a carnival. One good pen, he said, for one good life. He used it to sign our first mortgage. He used it to sign the paychecks in the early years when we had to float ourselves because the business didn't love us yet. He used it on birthday cards and on permission slips and on the note he taped to the fridge the night his mother died. Back soon. Do not wait up. Be kind to each other. The pen was the ritual. He never signed with hospital ballpoints. He never signed when his hand shook. That isn't sentimentality. It's pattern. I thanked the lawyer for coming. I asked him for the notary log and a copy of the hospital consent form that said my husband had capacity. He looked surprised, as if widows bring casseroles to their own undoing and ask for nothing else. He promised to follow up. He left his card, thick as certainty. The house grew very quiet. I made tea. I sat at the table and looked at the envelope. Sometimes you have to let grief finish one sentence before you start another. I cried a little, then I did what I do. I opened the safe. We don't keep cash in there. We keep a marriage, tax returns in orderly stacks, insurance policies no one reads until they must, a USB drive labeled backup in my husband's blocky print, a folder of his signatures, the same loops, the same slope, the flourish he added after his father died, as if to carry the name with an extra curl of responsibility. And there it was, the pharmacy bag. Staples sliced, sticker intact. Lorazepam 0.5 milligram, as needed for agitation. Date and time. The very same day as the will, less than 15 minutes before the notary stamp. Grief is heavy, but it doesn't fog math. 15 minutes is not enough time for a sedative to be a whisper and then nothing. 15 minutes is the worst time to sign a new future. I called our old lawyer, the one who handled mundane things like parking tickets and property taxes, and the time my husband backed into the neighbor's mailbox and insisted on paying for an entire new post and flowers because I wrecked the whole scene. He sounded tired and kind, the way you hope a lawyer will sound when you are both older than you were when you started this life. I didn't draft anything new, he said. He asked me to stop by a few months ago to talk about making sure you were protected if his mind got foggy. We made a draft. Your name is the primary. Your children are contingents. He wanted the company's shares in a trust for you. I never heard back to finalize. Could someone else finalize it? I asked. Someone could write an entirely different document, he said. They'd need a notary. They'd need to say he had capacity. They'd need a lot. A lot can be gathered in 15 minutes if a person has a key to a quiet room and a pen that doesn't ask questions. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the red digits on the oven clock change and thought about the girl's face when I mentioned DNA. I thought about the way she touched my husband's arm, like a nurse and a daughter and a salesperson all at once. I thought about how he smiled at her, like she was a relief from a guilt I didn't know he carried. Sometimes love doesn't keep you safe. It keeps you occupied while danger finds another door. The next morning I drove to the hospital. I sat in the parking lot until I could breathe all the way to my ribs. I asked to speak with the charge nurse from the day the will was signed. She remembered the notary. They were in and out fast, she said. Odd. People usually want to reread every line when it's that kind of paper. Did he seem clear? I asked. He seemed calm, she said. The medication helped with agitation. I asked for the medication record. I asked for the consent form that says a patient can understand what he's signing. I asked for the timestamp video from the hallway. It's amazing what you can ask for politely and receive when you are not screaming. The nurse took pity. The privacy officer took a little convincing. I left with copies. Not everything, but enough. The hallway camera showed the notary going in at 3:24 and leaving at 3:26. 2 minutes. I've waited longer for toast to pop. At home, I opened the USB. My husband was a tidy man in a chaotic world. He had exported emails. He had saved receipts for the kind of things people forget to save. He had, bless him, a drafts folder that included an email to our old lawyer about finalizing the protective will, where I would be safe even if he became soft-headed for a spell. The date was 2 months before the hospital event. I scrolled further. I found a message from the young woman to a different attorney's office labeled Subject: Urgent. Need updated estate plan before discharge. I felt my mouth go dry. That email wasn't in his voice. It wasn't even in his account. It was in hers, seeing a Gmail with his name that he never used. One of those fresh-baked addresses people create to go with a plan. You can be 68 and still learn new tricks. Take screenshots, name files with dates, store them in a folder called Truth. When you lose a husband, people bring lasagna, and they bring advice. Don't fight, someone said at church. It isn't dignified. Take the house, another friend said. It's enough. Enough for what, I wondered. Enough to teach our children that you ignore a thief because to name theft is rude? Enough to tell myself that he wanted this, because it is easier to resent the dead than confront the living. On the third day after the reading, the young woman returned. She wore black as if grief were a uniform, and carried a folder as if kindness were a contract. A lawyer came with her. Slick hair, loud watch. He smiled at my curtains like he was appraising them. We would like to make this smooth, he said. We can arrange movers. 30 days is generous. In exchange, you agree not to contest the will. We can even discuss a lump sum so you won't have any worries. Will you take a DNA test? I asked her. I don't need to prove blood to honor love, she said. He chose me. I pressed my phone to record. I asked her to repeat it. She did. The lawyer shifted just slightly like his shoes didn't fit. Do you have the notary log? I asked him. Will provide. You will provide now, I said, or you will receive my request by certified mail tomorrow. Your choice. He left without giving it. Sometimes men who are used to steering prefer to circle back when the lanes are clearer. She lingered. She put her hand on my kitchen table, right on the ghost of a watermark from a pitcher that dripped the night my husband forgot to close it properly. I watched her fingers spread over that pale ring and thought of tree rings, of storms, of droughts, of how time tells the truth even when we don't want it to. Do you think I am a monster? She asked. I think you learned to survive, I said. And then you learned to like winning more than you liked being good. She flinched. Not much. Enough to tell me there was a forest behind the smile. My lawyer, mine old loyal, brought in someone younger, a woman who does nothing but estates and elder law and the ugly corners where love and paperwork meet. She talked fast and wrote faster. We're going to prove a few things, she said. Lack of capacity at the time of signing, undue influence, improper notarization, and if the judge lets us, we will introduce the prior draft to show clear intent. The no contest clause won't protect an invalid document. It's a scarecrow. Scary until you realize it's stuffed with straw. What if I lose? I asked. Then you go home from a fight you were meant to have, she said. But if I'm reading this right, you won't lose. We gathered 4 pieces. First, the medication record and nurse testimony. A sedative given minutes before a life-altering signature, notes indicating confusion earlier in the day, a patient who, in the kindest reading, should have waited until morning to change his mind about everything. Second, the notary log, obtained by subpoena when the slick lawyer suddenly forgot how to email. The log showed a 2-minute visit, no witnesses listed, though the will said 2 were present, a missing driver's license number because the patient did not have his wallet. A hallway video that contradicted the notary's later memory of spending time ensuring comprehension. Third, The emails and payment trail. The young woman's message to the alternative attorney's office. A retainer paid from an account my husband never used, funded by a cashier's check purchased by someone with her initials. A calendar note in her phone. How did we get it? A screenshot she sent in a message to a friend, bragging that it's almost done, timestamped the morning of the signing. Fourth, the handwriting. The Mont Blanc signature, steady and intentional from before. The hospital signature, tilted and wavering, with a pressure pattern that a forensic examiner described as consistent with sedation or tremor. I didn't need his words. I could see the tremble. When you've watched the same hand pour coffee for 40 years, you know when it is not itself. Courtrooms are colder than funerals and less forgiving. The young woman wore a dress the color of mercy. Her lawyer spoke about compassion and late-life regrets, about lost years and found daughters, about a man seized by a beautiful impulse to heal a wound he couldn't heal any other way. He said I had no claim to control a choice my husband made. He said love was not a crime. Our lawyer didn't talk about love. She talked about time. 3:14 p.m. for the sedative. 3:26 p.m. for the notary stamp. 2 minutes of a visit. A notary log incomplete. A hospital consent form lacking the required annotation that a patient had been assessed immediately prior to signing. An earlier draft from our longtime lawyer reflecting my husband's stated intent to protect me, not displace me. A set of emails that made it all smell like planning, not revelation. When she laid the pharmacy label on the evidence table, the judge leaned forward. When she played the hallway video, and then the notary's testimony, and then the hallway video again, even the court reporter looked up. The young woman took the stand. She said she did not ask for anything. She said he insisted. She said love comes late to some people, and it is cruel to keep it out in the hallway. She would not agree to DNA. She would not explain the payment for the retainer. She cried, and the room shifted, because tears still have gravity, even when they fall on the wrong season. Then our old lawyer testified. He is not theatrical. He brought a folder with tabs, and his tie was crooked. He told the court about the draft my husband requested months before, the one that left me safe and the children secure. He said my husband used the word foggy to describe days after the hospital incident. He said my husband wanted me to have authority precisely because he feared he might be too generous with strangers. The judge ruled 3 weeks later in an order that read like arithmetic. The will executed in the hospital was invalid due to lack of capacity and undue influence. The prior draft, properly witnessed, properly notarized, prepared when my husband's mind was still brisk and his signature still sailed, would be honored. The no contest clause could not save an invalid instrument. The court invited us to pursue damages if we wished, for intentional interference with an expected inheritance and for the costs of unwinding the scheme. People asked me if I felt triumphant. I did not. I felt like I had been holding my breath under a winter lake and someone finally broke the ice above me. The air hurt going back into my lungs. That's the thing the movies don't tell you. Justice isn't a song. It's oxygen. The young woman disappeared from town. I heard secondhand that she went west. A friend swore they saw her on a fundraiser page, raising money for someone else's emergency with a story that sounded rehearsed. I don't follow. I don't need to. Some people learned the wrong lesson from almosts. They double down on almost. I did not ask the court to punish her beyond returning what could be returned. I asked for a restraining order and for the costs of the litigation so that my children wouldn't learn to be generous with wolves. The judge agreed. My lawyer suggested we file a bar complaint against the notary and the alternative attorney's office. We did. I slept well that night. In the spring, I set aside a portion of what we saved and started a small scholarship in my husband's name, the way he always said he wanted to help kids who didn't do well on standardized tests but could fix anything with their hands. In the summer, I drove out to the lake house and sat on the dock with my shoes off and my skirt hiked indecently for a widow and let the water look back at me. I thought about the girl's hand on my kitchen table and the ring of the water stain and the rings of the tree that gave us that table and how everything keeps time in its own way. If you are a woman my age and you are listening to this with your hands wrapped around a mug you hold for warmth, hear me. Do not fear paperwork. Do not hand your dignity to people who ask you to be quiet to make it easier for them to be loud. Keep the pharmacy labels. Ask for the notary log. Ask for hallway video. Ask for the earlier draft. Ask for DNA when someone says they don't want money but collects it anyway. Kindness and boundaries are not enemies. Love and truth are married, and truth refuses to sit in the car while love goes inside. I won't pretend there aren't days I wish I had hugged the girl at the door and told her to stay for dinner and tried to braid a relationship from frayed string. But some knots only look like knots. They're actually loops that tighten around whatever you feed them. If my husband had known the extent, if he had been fully himself, he would have handed me his Mont Blanc and said, "Fix this. You're better at details." So I did. There are moments burned into me that I am strangely grateful for. The nurse's face when she realized what the hallway video meant. The way my young lawyer tapped a pen against her chin and grinned when a boring procedural flaw landed like a thunderclap. The judge's voice softening half a shade when he turned from the law to me. The sound of my son saying, "I'm proud of you, Mom," with the emphasis on proud, like it surprised him to say it out loud. The way my daughter slid her hand into mine during the reading of the order, fingers warm, nails bitten down like when she was 12, and thought I didn't notice. I kept my house. I kept my name where my husband wanted it. I kept my children from learning that silence is a virtue when the truth is inconvenient. And one more thing. I kept his pen. It sits on the desk in the room where he used to read the paper and fall asleep every Thursday afternoon because that was the rhythm of his life. Sometimes I sign checks with it. Sometimes I sign condolence cards. Once I signed a letter to the board of our company reminding them that our employees are people with mortgages and stomach upsets and sick parents of their own, not lines on a spreadsheet to be trimmed because it makes a graph curve more attractively. The pen writes like the past is still patient. If you've made it this far, I want to ask you directly. If you discovered a will was signed within minutes of a sedative, what 3 steps would you take first? Would you gather the pharmacy label, the notary log, and the prior draft? Would you push for DNA? Would you stand up in your own kitchen and record the conversation where someone tells you love doesn't need proof while they hold your future in a folder? Tell me. Write it down. Someone like me is reading your comment at 2 a.m. with a pillow behind her back and a box of tissues nearby, and she needs to know what courage sounds like in other people's mouths. I'm going to leave you with 2 more stories, because we older women collect stories the way our mothers collected jars. One for sugar, one for buttons, one for nails that might fit something someday. If this one made you feel less alone, you might want to hear about the nursing home that wasn't a home at all and the paper that turned love into profit until a young nurse and an older woman made the state listen, or the one about the sweet neighbor girl who called an older widow grandma while she tried to slide a deed across a table, and the mistake she made when she forgot the widow once worked 30 years in the county clerk's office. We are not past our usefulness. We are the archive. We are the proof. And when necessary, we are the storm. I didn't plan on becoming the sort of woman who keeps folders on the dining room chair, But after court, the chair to my left wore a neat stack of labeled envelopes like a cardigan. I told myself I'd put everything away once I felt safe enough to forget. Safety is a funny thing in late life. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It tiptoes in through ordinary days. On a Tuesday, the mailman handed me a certified letter. The return address was the State Bar's disciplinary committee. I stood in the foyer and read it top to bottom without sitting down. The committee had accepted our complaint and scheduled a hearing to determine whether the notary and the alternative attorney had violated procedure. I wasn't angry as I read. I was meticulous. Anger blurs. Meticulousness is how older women win when a room assumes they'll tire first. At the hearing, a young man in a cheap tie explained to the panel that hospitals are busy places and that people often sign things under all sorts of medications. I listened. Then the chairwoman, a silver-haired lawyer with the voice of a choir leader who's seen every kind of Sunday, asked, "Isn't the very point of a notary to slow a moment down so that capacity is verified?" "That's ideal," he said. "Law doesn't sell ideals," she replied. "It sells procedures that protect mortal people doing mortal things. 2 minutes is not a procedure." They suspended the notary for a year and fined the firm that rushed the papers. It didn't feel like vengeance. It felt like sweeping the porch before dusk, so the mice didn't think the house was abandoned. My son called that night and asked if I wanted him to move in for a while. I told him no. Grief had trained me to do things alone again, and besides, I wanted him to learn that his mother could climb stairs and laws and ladders of bureaucracy without being carried. "I'll bring dinner on Fridays," he said, "and I'll fix the loose hinge on the pantry door." He laughed at himself then, because even after a courtroom, we are a family of hinges and pantry doors. People in town began to treat me differently. Not with awe, thank God, but with a kind of relieved respect, as if they'd been waiting for someone to prove that late-life dignity isn't a museum piece. At the grocery store, a woman I'd seen 100 times without a word stood beside me in the bread aisle and said, "My sister signed a reverse mortgage she didn't understand. Could you tell me who you called first?" I wrote the elder law attorney's name on the back of my receipt and underlined it twice. "Start with one phone call," I said. "After that, your courage will have a place to sit." I kept the lake house mostly for memory and because the dock knew my feet. On early mornings, I took coffee outside and watched the water hold the sky. Ducks stitched the surface with V's so delicate I felt bad blinking. I'd talk to my husband out there, not to ask permission or forgiveness, but to keep him real. "They're fixing the turn lane out by the school," I'd say, "and I made your chili with too much cumin." And once, "I miss your foolishness." There, I said it. The young lawyer on my side, the quick one with notes like a storm, asked whether I would consider speaking to a small group at the library about documents and danger. I told her I would, but only if the talk was a story and not a lecture. "Older women don't need lectures," I said. "We need pictures we can hold in our heads when our hands are shaking." She smiled. "Then tell them about the green seal and the pharmacy sticker." So I did. The library meeting room smelled like carpet cleaner and ambition. 10 people came, then 18, then we moved to the big room next time. I brought a shoebox with objects, a photocopy of the notary seal, names redacted, the pharmacy label, a printout of the hallway still, a ballpoint that stuttered on command, and last, my husband's Mont Blanc. I let each person hold the pen for a second. "It isn't about the brand," I told them. "It's about ritual. Decide today what you will never sign under the fog of pills or tears. Write it down. Tell your people. Tape it inside a kitchen cabinet where the cereal used to live." A woman with a braid as white as a snow fence raised her hand. "What if the person trying to change things is your own child?" Then, I said, keeping my voice gentle, you love them with your spine instead of your knees. People can be wrong and still be yours. You stay their mother, and you stay your own guardian. It's not betrayal to demand a second opinion. It's stewardship. After the session, a man my age hovered by the door until the room was almost empty. My wife died last year, he said, eyes fixed somewhere useful like the baseboard. A lady from church has been very kind. She says she wants to help me get organized. She brings forms already filled in, and I feel flattered that anyone wants to look at me that closely. He looked up then. Is it wrong to feel flattered? It isn't wrong, I said. It's human. But flattery is like a sugar glaze. It makes anything look finished. Cut into the cake. Ask what's underneath. He laughed once, a bark of relief. I like cake metaphors, he said. Come to my house Tuesday. I'll bring a red pen. When the scholarship fund opened applications, I read every letter out loud, as if the kitchen air needed new stories to balance the old one. There was a girl who could rebuild a carburetor on a Saturday and quote Frost on a Sunday. There was a boy who worked the night shift at a nursing home and kept a spiral notebook of poems in his lunchbox because poems tasted better with ham sandwiches. There was a veteran who wanted to be an electrician because lights are such a good apology for darkness. I chose 3 the first year, 5 the next. I wrote each a note about my husband, about how he would have loved the way they loved work. I told them that equipment breaks, hearts break, but hands and mind together will carry them across a lot of broken ground. One afternoon, months after the ruling, I met the nurse from the hospital in the cereal aisle. Funny how aisles become confessionals. She put a box of bran in her cart and then, without warning, started to cry. I didn't know what I was seeing that day, she said. We chart, we medicate, we witness. I thought being calm meant being capable. I touched her forearm. We all confuse quiet with consent sometimes, I said. It's why traffic lights are colors and not words. Words can be talked around. Colors tell you to stop. She laughed through the tears. You should work in psych, she said. I raised 2 children and a small business, I answered. Psych was the water I swam in. People wrote me letters, real ones with stamps and cursive leaning toward me like old friends. A widow in Oregon sent me a photo of a green file folder labeled, "If They Try Anything," in thick marker. A retiree in Florida mailed me a newspaper clipping about a notary crackdown with a post-it that said, "We are sweeping porches, sister." A granddaughter from Oklahoma wrote, "Grandma always thought paperwork was a man's job. We printed your story and read it together. Yesterday, she asked for the notary log when the bank came to the house. I almost cheered. There were days when I wondered if I'd grown self-righteous, if the part of me that had been humiliated by the first reading of the will was now strutting around town in borrowed robes. The cure for that is laundry. I'd fold towels until humility returned. I'd take a casserole to the neighbor with the bad knee. I'd sit on the back steps and let my spine remember gravity. The world doesn't need more victors. It needs more keepers of documents, of stories, of each other. One evening, the phone rang during the baseball game. A voice I didn't recognize said my name, then paused, then said, "I'm sorry." It took a second to place the timbre. The young woman? I sat down without telling my knees. "Why are you calling?" I asked, not unkindly. "I saw your library talk online," she said. "Someone posted a clip, the part about the pen. I thought you were going to scorch me. Instead, you talked about ritual and time. People pay attention to time," I said. "Scorching is just weather." "I'm in a program," she said. "They say we have to make amends where possible. The list is longer than I want it to be. Some doors I can't knock on. I don't know what I'm asking you for." You're asking me to say that your apology changes everything, I said. It doesn't, but it can change you. Silence creaked. Do you hate me? She asked. I don't carry hate. It's too heavy at my age, I said. I carry caution and I carry hope. Both fit in a pocket. Would you meet me? In public? Just to look at me like I'm not a monster. I thought of the green seal. I thought of the Mont Blanc. I thought of the way my husband smiled at her and how it made me sad, not because he loved her, but because he was so relieved to feel useful again. I'll meet you at the church garden, I said. There's a bench by the crepe myrtles. 10 minutes, no paperwork. We sat side by side like women waiting for a bus that wouldn't come. She looked thinner, older in the eyes. I came to town thinking I could fix the ache in me by grabbing at other people's certainties, she said. Turns out certainty is the one thing you can't steal. You can borrow it, I said, if you stay long enough to do the work. We didn't hug. I'm not sure we'll ever speak again, but I slept well that night because forgiveness is not a receipt you hand someone else. It's a chair you set out for yourself so you don't have to stand while you explain your life to the ceiling at 2 a.m. I started keeping a little list taped to the inside of a pantry door, a list I wish someone had handed me the week the envelope came. Keep your own calendar of important days and hours. Hospitals have theirs. You keep yours. Ask for logs, notary, visitor, medication, hallway camera. Paper is shy until you call it by name. Store things in a folder named Truth. Computers search alphabetically. Make it easy on your future self. When someone says, "Don't you trust me?" answer, enough to verify. Decide what you will never sign. Not after sedatives, not after funerals, not after 3 a.m. Tell your people. Write it down. Buy a pen you love. Not because pens are magic, because rituals are. Once a month I cook the chili he liked and invite whoever is at loose ends. My son, if he's not traveling for work, my neighbor with the mended knee, the nurse if she's off duty, the library lady with the choir voice, sometimes the young lawyer who became a friend. We eat at the same table where the green seal once shocked me, and we tell small stories. There is a holiness in small stories. They knit days together so grief can't pull them apart. A year after the ruling, I went to the lake at dawn with a thermos and the scholarship essays for the new year. Mist lifted off the water like the lake was remembering how to breathe. A heron stood stiller than any sermon. I read a boy's essay about building porch ramps for old dogs and older men, about how dignity sometimes needs a few boards and a Saturday. I marked a star in the corner. I thought, not for the first time, that my husband had been right about the kind of kids he wanted to help. Give me the ones who make things, he used to say. They're the ones who fix what breaks. Driving home, I passed the hospital and felt the old ache try a door. I rolled down the window and let the wind rearrange my hair. The ache couldn't find its key. Not today. If you are listening to me now, if your mug has gone from hot to warm, to the temperature of memory, if you are a woman who has spent her life keeping other people fed and dressed and on time while your own soft needs waited in line, consider this your permission slip. You may be both soft and specific. You may hold a hand and a hard line. You may insist on proof without apologizing for your insistence. You may love a man for 40 years and still refuse to let his worst, foggiest hour rewrite the promise he made to your best, clearest day together. The pen is in the drawer. The folder is on the chair. The lake is where we left it. The world is untidy, but not unfixable. When the next envelope comes, to you or to someone you love, remember the green seal and the pharmacy sticker and the hallway clock and the way a notary's job is to slow time down until truth can catch up. Remember that you are not a guest in your own life. You are the archivist and the witness, and when needed, the storm. Now tell me, right there in the comments where other women will read you at 2 a.m, what 3 things you would grab first if your life were suddenly recited in a voice that left your name out. Would you reach for the pharmacy label? The notary log? The draft that kept faith with who you were together before fog and flattery arrived? Would you ask for DNA when love arrived with a folder and a deadline? I will be there, reading, pen in hand, Mont Blanc on the good days, ballpoint on the others, nodding for you the way strangers once nodded for me. And somewhere beyond these words, a younger woman with a braid like a snow fence will feel her spine strengthen because you spoke. That is how we pass the ritual along. Not with fury, with steadiness, not with the noise of victory, with the quiet of procedures observed and boundaries kept. At the end of the screen, I will leave 2 more stories because I am not done keeping company with you. One is about a paper called Medical Power of Attorney that turned into a ticket to a place that called itself a home but forgot what the word meant, until a nurse and a grandmother said in chorus, "Enough." The other is about a deed a neighbor tried to slide across a table like a napkin, and how a widow who once filed plat maps for 30 years smiled and said, "Let's take a proper look at that line. Come back for them if you want, or sit for a while with this one. Either way, know this. There are women like you in every town, women with folders on chairs and pens in drawers and a memory for the exact time a green seal tried to erase them and failed. We are not past our usefulness. We are the proof. And when necessary, yes, we are the storm.